Welcome to Talent Pop Podcast, where we will provide tips and strategies for success in sales, networking, marketing, and business. We will be learning from real stories that will inspire you to unlock your potential, discover your talents, and develop the confidence to take action on your biggest dreams. We are focused on empowering women to connect their passions with their purpose to find true fulfillment. It's time to pop off, queens! Pop off, queens! Hi, this is Amanda O'Connell, and this is Talent Pop. And today's episode, I have a special guest, Julie Linehan, and she is a financial advisor with Northwestern Mutual. So welcome, Julie. Thank you so much for being here. Excited to hear more about your story and everything.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. And so Julie's definitely a special, unique individual. We definitely have some similarities in terms of, our recruiting backgrounds, and she's had a lot of success, in recruiting, and just has an entrepreneurial nature. She's also a mom. I'll let her talk about that a little bit more, but just super inspiring to connect with, another hardworking woman, in the world here. And she's doing a lot of great things and recently has had some success as well. So I'll kind of let you take it away.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So thanks again for having me. So I figured I'd start, just kind of share a little bit about kind of my background and my upbringing, and then transition into sort of my career profile. So I grew up on the South Shore of Massachusetts in a town called Bridgewater. And I grew up with this, raised by a single mom, had two younger sisters, all girls in the family. And we didn't really have a lot of money. So growing up for us, that was sort of, we watched our mom, super hardworking, ended up kind of bringing herself up into, in the later years of her life, became very successful. It was a really good example for me. As far as what I wanted to do with my life when I was in my early 20s, just like the rest of us, I didn't really know. I thought I knew, and I was thinking I wanted to go to law school and be a lawyer and make a lot of money, and that was sort of the plan. So I had this master plan that I was going to move out to Los Angeles, and after living in California for a year, I was going to apply for a state school and go to law school, and it would be cheaper because I'd have a year of residency. I had this whole plan, moved out to the West Coast, and then started working as a paralegal and realized that this was really not the career for me. Sitting behind the desk and basically head down in the books and writing was just way too boring. So I went to a small staffing agency and was looking for a new job, and they got me an offer as a paralegal, but they also said, hey, we think that you might be good at this, and it's very people oriented. So long story short, I took the position in staffing, and I worked for a startup, not really knowing it was a startup and not really knowing how risky it was. So it was just the three partners and me. And I basically kind of just did whatever they said. Started just calling a bunch of people, like wouldn't give up, kind of relentlessly trying to grow in the position. And I stayed with them for 5 years, and they taught me a lot. I thought that I was successful. I was super excited because I was making, I think in the last year, I was not quite at six figures, but 5 years into the business, I think I earned like 90,000 or something like that.
Awesome.
Meanwhile, Robert Half is a huge staffing agency that maybe some of you are familiar with. They were trying to recruit me. And the funny thing about it is that the three partners at the startup had come from Robert Half, and they always talked about how hard it was to work there. And it was just, you had to go to work in a suit every day, and it was really hard. And so I was kind of like raised, up in this career to think that Robert Half was corporate America, and it was just not good. But they ended up getting me on board. They made me like a great offer. And what I didn't realize is that I didn't have, I worked for this small company, but I didn't really believe in myself. I didn't know what I was capable of because I had somebody who was kind of hand holding me through the whole thing. And so moving to Robert Half kind of gave me more autonomy in a way, because the management was so far up that they weren't micromanaging, and they put me into a management role. And I felt like maybe I wasn't quite ready for that, but of course I took the opportunity.
Amazing.
So in that first year, the billings and my income quadrupled from what I was at in the first job. And I realized I didn't need anyone, that I was, capable of doing this on my own, and didn't realize, maybe I should have moved there a lot sooner.
Wow.
So Robert Half was, I mean, I have all good things to say about that company. I stayed with the company for, I think, 8 years. I
Now, were
built up,
you commuting in to Boston as well?
I was still on the West Coast.
Oh, okay.
So I started with Robert Half in Los Angeles,
Mhm.
and I was commuting. I was going into the office every day. There was no work from home at that point.
Okay.
So I ended up sort of building out that branch in Westwood, Los Angeles, and stayed there for about a year and a half. Got pregnant with my second baby. And then went on maternity leave. And when I came back, I announced to my team that I was transitioning out to Boston.
Okay.
Company sent me to Boston, where there was pretty much no team. I worked for the legal
Mhm.
departments for Robert Half Legal. So I went out there and I had this sort of challenge to build up this new team,
Mhm.
and did that. Ended up, I think we finished the #2 office in the country after the first year. So that was super exciting to just like build and mentor people.
Yep. And
Um,
how big was your team? I guess in LA and then in Boston, what was the team size that you were managing?
yeah, so it went from, there was one guy in Los Angeles when I started, and we built it up to, I think it was 7. And then I moved to Boston, and there was one kind of very new, very green guy there, and we built it up to, at one point, I think we had 9.
Wow.
Um,
That's not
and I
easy.
kind of went through some personal stuff, and I ended up actually getting a divorce. And at that point, I was, we were doing well, but I felt like personally, I was in a position where I was not, it wasn't responsible for me to be in management at that time. And I felt like it was a little bit just too much responsibility. So I actually asked to step down,
Mm.
and started working remotely from one of the satellite offices.
Mhm.
Kind of, just went through, just needed the time
Yeah.
personally. I was really grateful that they gave me that opportunity to step back, and said, whenever you're ready, you can come back into management. So
Yeah.
after, I think it was probably like a year, I said, okay, I'm ready. Can I actually start up an office close to my house in Braintree? So there was this satellite office for Robert Half, but there was no Robert Half legal presence. Because I had proven myself, they said, sure, go for it. So I ended up building up a team there, and we had, I think it was about 5 people in that office.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so basically, as far as recruiting goes, it was a great career. And once you get up and running and you're making good money and you have flexibility, in my case, I could work from home sometimes. It's
Yep.
a tough gig to walk away from.
Mm.
But what I realized when I was in staffing, I did direct hire staffing while I was at Robert Half. And as I was coaching people through their career transitions, I started to realize that as I was talking to people, that maybe I needed to take some of my own advice, which was,
Mhm.
money is not it's not the only thing that you want to look at. Sometimes
Mhm.
there are
Mhm.
other aspects to a job that are maybe more important.
Yep.
And I was kind of feeling like, I was almost 40 years old, and I just felt like it was time to try something else, because I didn't want to be stuck in one thing forever. I kind of wanted more autonomy. I wanted maybe to try something where I was an independent business owner. I have this sort of
Mhm.
entrepreneurial side to me.
Mhm.
And so I started thinking about, well, what else is out there that's going to be able to match this, that has unlimited upside, that's going to give me autonomy, where maybe I could start my own business. And after talking to my financial advisors, I had a few, I realized that this might be a career that I wanted to pursue. Um, a lot of the kind of skills that I developed in recruiting were transferable into this role. A lot of it is just very people driven. You have to be, it's very goal focused. Have to be okay with, people flaking on you, people rejecting you, people saying no, and just kind of, not quit and just be persistent.
Yep.
So after interviewing at a bunch of different places, I decided to take the leap and come over and join Northwestern Mutual. Um, I'm actually not directly employed by the company though. So I'm an independent business owner. And I feel like I kind of get the best of both worlds because while I'm affiliated with Northwestern, I have the flexibility to go outside from an investment perspective and work with any firm out there to help clients when it comes to what they might want to do with investments. But I also have the ability to use, when it comes to insurance products, I can use Northwestern, and there are only 9,000 advisors in the country that can use Northwestern. If you're not affiliated, you can't access their products. And when it comes to insurance, they're the most highly rated company out there. So company has just given me a lot of autonomy, building a business, hiring employees, working from home when I want to. And the first year in the business was, they warned me, but it was really tough. COVID hit, I think it was 2 weeks into my career transition. I was kind of like, what did I do? So I was working from home. I have got 2 kids who at the time were 6 and 8.
Yeah.
And they were at home with me just hanging out because like the rest of us, we didn't have anywhere to put them. So, I'm like taking calls. My kids are sitting on the couch, eating whatever they want, watching
Yes.
TV.
Yes,
It was
I can
just
relate to
like
that.
mayhem. But that's a story that most of us have, and anyone who has kids can relate with that. But yeah, the first year was just like nose to the grindstone, just making a bunch of calls. And I know Will was one of the people that, your husband, Amanda, that I
Yes.
had called just to say, hey, here's what I'm doing.
Yes.
And I ended up working with, I've, developed a pretty good network. I'm working with a lot of the people that I worked with in my past career, lawyers, recruiters, salespeople. That's just kind of naturally become my market. So yeah, I don't know if you have sort of any questions on any of that, but
Yeah. No, it's amazing to hear your story too. And just even from the beginning, I mean, there were things that, when I met you the first time and I heard part of your story, but kind of getting the full spectrum is really amazing. Cause I think that you have this unique like grit about you. And I think a lot of that could stem from, your childhood and your upbringing and seeing your mom working so hard. And it's really inspiring. And I think a lot of people can connect with that, seeing what their parents have gone through and just taking, past experience and building from there. And so it makes a lot of sense because I see you rock star, earning these accolades, and it's like, you wonder sometimes like, well, geez, how does this person become this way? And so it definitely makes sense. And I think, in that sales environment and, even for me coming from marketing, I can relate to your story, sitting behind a desk, and wanting that connection and that communication and then getting into sales and okay, there's a whole world out there, but you have to get used to the rejection. And so there was so much of that I had to open my eyes to and be ready to kind of go up against. So no, it's amazing. And I would love for you to share a little bit too about, I think you have some recent, was it award or something? Was it from this past year that you have achieved? I'd love to hear about that too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we just finished our fiscal year, and it was my second fiscal year with the company. And the company actually will, it's a lot like recruiting, and we're at least with the bigger companies where they kind of show you where you stack up to your peers. So they separate it by class year. And I came in 2020. So for the 2020 class, there are, I think, about 450 advisors. And for the fiscal year, I finished number 7 overall, but I also was this number 2 for females. So
amazing.
Thank you. So it was really exciting. It's funny because I was just kind of like doing what they told me to do. I was like, tell me what the most successful people do, and I'll just do that. And for a while, it was just feeling like this isn't working, but I'm just going to keep going. Like, I said, a lot of rejection, a lot of failure, but that's, most people who succeed, they fail more than anybody else.
It's true.
And so it was great because I did not have any expectations of myself to finish in the top 10, but my mentor was like, I want you to aim for that. And I was just like, okay, I remember looking at the numbers, 6 months into the 12 months and
Yep.
saying, I just don't think this is going to happen, but
Yep.
I'll try. And so something kind of happened and something kind of clicked and I turned a corner, but it was really just a matter of me, kind of basically mimicking what the top, advisors
Yeah.
do and doing what they do and just keep doing it and doing it until it clicked and something happened and it
Yep.
worked. So I think, when it comes to recruiting too, same thing. When I went to Robert Half, they had studied, unlike the startup I worked for,
Mhm.
Robert Half had studied what worked for the top performers, and then they taught the new recruiters, this
Mhm.
is what you do. And I was very much just by the book in the beginning. I was like, I'm going to hit the activity and the metrics that they said. I'm going to listen to them, even though a lot of what they're telling me is counterintuitive. And I did the same thing with Northwestern, and it works. And then, you do get to this point though, where it becomes less a numbers game and more just like intuitive
Yep.
and
You build those
maybe not push.
instincts. Yep.
And more exciting, because then it's not like a volume thing. It's more each individual that you're working with. And I feel like when I said money is not enough, I am in the right place because I really feel like I'm helping people. And so I don't see people as a number. It took a while to kind of establish a network, but now it's more just, what is going to be like, let's really sit down and think about
Yep.
this. What's going to be the best thing for this person? And the other similarity in what I'm doing now versus what I did in recruiting is like, let's help this person transition, whatever it is, whether it's they're moving from one job to another and they need to roll their old 401k, or they're buying a house, or they're getting married, or they're getting ready to retire. And it's super rewarding to work with them in that way. And it just becomes, after all the hard work comes in, you get to really make a difference and an impact in these people's lives. Much like recruiting, right? When you're moving
Yes.
someone from one job to another. I think the difference in this is what's more rewarding is that the people that I'm working with now, I get to stay in touch with, and I'm talking to them a couple of times a year versus when I was placing attorneys in jobs. If I was doing my job right, they were staying there for years and I wasn't really in touch with them after that. So
Right. Yeah, no, that's so cool. And I love to hear kind of the similarities too. And I mean, there's a lot of options out there, and just I think it's helpful for folks to hear your story and just how, from coming out of school and you got all these options, and then, finding out about staffing and, kind of falling into it. But I think some things that stick out to me too are the fact that, you seem super coachable. Like you were just like, I'm going to come in here and be a sponge and it was because in the back of your mind, it was like, I want to succeed. And it was like, I think when you have that in the back of your mind, you're kind of just willing to like do whatever people say just to have that success. Cause and then once you learn and, get your feet wet and you get into it, then you can, focus on like quality. And then like, even for me, I can relate to that too. Now being able to work, do a podcast and connect to like, the audience that I can really relate to. And it makes it even more special. Like I think you were saying, it's just like you can focus on that quality versus that volume. And I think in the beginning, it's very, you don't really know kind of what it takes or even who you're connecting with, right? It's like you need to connect with everyone to really find those people that you can kind of work with long term too. So
yeah,
that's super interesting.
I think, and having been in management, and mentoring people now in this role as well, I found that the people who succeeded were those who were coachable. And that is one really big, I would say, consistent across the board, is the people who trusted the management and trusted the system.
Yes.
But there are a lot of people who come in and they're smart and they know it. But what they realize is that they don't know everything. And that's like, they're their own worst enemy because they don't know what they don't know. And they think they can do things different and be creative. And I think that part comes later in their career for most people. It's like, learn the basics, do it, do what
the
they're
basics. Yeah.
And then once you do that, you can be creative and you can kind of go in your own direction, but you have to kind of establish like the foundation by listening to what the senior people are doing and the most successful people are doing. So I would say that that was probably the number one reason for failure. I don't think that when it comes to my skills, I never considered myself to be, I've never been the best at anything, but I've always been really hardworking. I've
Yep.
always been coachable. And I don't give up. So I would say those are sort of the things I would attribute those things to my success.
Yeah, it's amazing. We've talked about this on the podcast before too. It's like the people that work hard, it's like they say, there's like a quote, it's like, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And it's like, you can have all the talent in the world, but when it comes down to it, you've got to be doing the reps and you have to put the work in. And yeah, just super inspiring to hear, your grit, and that, you're just willing to kind of overcome the failure and everything. So it's just awesome to hear. And yeah, are there any tips that you want to share? I mean, we covered a lot of stuff, I think, like in terms of, financial advising, and any tips for our audience, just if we don't know that world so much, like just kind of basic advice you might be able to provide.
Yeah, so I would say that for anybody who feels like, a lot of the people that I come across when I first sort of connect with them in an intro call feel initially like maybe it's too soon to engage with a financial advisor, or in some cases too late. And I would say that it never is. There are a lot of things that you can do early on to create habits that will make a huge difference for you down the road. So working with an advisor is going to generally get people there faster. When it comes to certain things like, signing up for your 401k, that can be really overwhelming for people. And, just kind of getting a basic idea of what you're investing in, I think is really important. Just kind of understanding what you're investing in, because it can be really complicated. And so that would be, signing up for your 401k. I think that's one thing that people sort of overlook, but if you're not doing it right, you can actually make pretty big mistakes long term. Another thing that I would say is that emergency fund is really important before you start actively investing. So aside from the 401k, always wanting to take advantage of the match, because that's free money and no one really should ever say no to free money.
Mm-hmm.
But before getting really aggressive in investments otherwise, just making sure that a couple things on the defensive side, you want to make sure that you have an emergency fund that's going to sustain you if you were to lose your job.
Mm-hmm.
You have 6 months of expenses saved up. And then once you hit that, then you can start thinking about investing and getting creative with all different kinds of savings, because there are so much more than just your 401k, your traditional savings, cryptocurrency. I mean, there's a lot out there. And generally spreading that and diversifying and having a little bit of money going into each bucket is the best way to go, because it diversifies your risk. If you have all your eggs in one basket, that can be a problem if you're not paying attention.
Yep.
I think another thing is debt. There's good debt, there's bad debt. Good debt would be like student loans and mortgage, but you also want to make sure that with your student loans and your mortgage that you have the best rate, the interest rate that you can.
Yep.
So really what we say is, just when it comes to the market, right? The stock market right now, it's been a little dicey and people are nervous about where it's headed, but historically, year over year, you're looking at between 8 and 12% return on your dollar, which is really good.
Mm-hmm.
When you put it in a bank account today, you're looking at 0.5%, maybe, if you're lucky. And so when you're looking at interest rates, ideally you want to keep your interest rates below that 8 to 12%. And if you can do that, then it could, I'm not saying for sure because everyone's case is different, but it could still make sense to be investing and also paying off just the minimum on your loans, but wanting to make sure that you have a competitive rate before you do that, if that makes sense. Before you start investing too, you want to make sure that you're getting rid of credit card debt. A lot of people have this kind of idea that you have to keep a credit card, sort of running balance in order to build your credit, which is not true. You can use your credit card and pay it off every month, and you can still build your credit that way.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I don't know if those are kind of some of the basic
Yeah.
things, but it's very personalized. I always want to be careful about giving advice, sort of, blanket advice, but it's a very personalized thing. And I would just say that, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them at any point.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's really helpful. And like you said, it's a unique approach. It's like I think of it like going to the doctor or something, it's like you can't just prescribe things and say like good luck, it's you really
Yeah.
have to kind of uncover like what is going on, your financial wellness essentially.
Yeah,
And then,
and that's a good way to put it, because right, if you asked a doctor like advice on health, they might be like, "Yikes, I don't know, eat healthy, make sure you're working out."
yeah,
Um,
just the basics, but
yeah,
exactly.
and I mean, it is. It's the biggest thing about people, with their finances. It's not necessarily about making a bunch of money. It's really more about being smart with what you do have and being a good saver and establishing good habits. Like I always say, it's kind of like, a muscle, and you have to,
Yeah.
have habits, and you have to practice it just like you do with working out. And the
Yep.
other thing I say is with saving, right? With your money, if you are putting any surplus away and you're putting that money away somewhere where you can't easily access it, I sort of use the analogy like bad food in the house. If I have it in front of me, I will probably eat it. But if it's somewhere, if I have to get up and get in my car and go to the grocery store to
Yep.
get it, I'm less likely to do that. So it's kind of the same thing with savings. Is if you can create a forced savings, and a 401k would be an example of that, just one
Yep.
example. That's a really smart thing to start doing early on.
Yep. And then you can't touch it. Or
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
penalties if you touch the money. Yeah, exactly.
Penalties, taxes is just not worth it. So
Yeah. Well, this is great advice. And obviously, if anybody's listening out there, you can definitely contact Julie. She'd love to sit down with you and kind of go through everything and, in a unique way. And she's awesome. So thank you so much for being here, and really, yeah, really excited to share this information with everybody. And yeah, thank you so much for being our guest.
yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, and pop up queens.
Thanks.